The law doesn't have a great track record when it comes to the supernatural. Everyone remembers the Salem witch trials, where 150 people were accused of witchcraft and 25 innocent people were hanged, tortured, or died in jail. Less people remember the werewolf trials that took place in Europe as far back as the 15th century, when men and a few women were found guilty of turning into wolves and devouring children. In recent years, the legal system has separated itself from cases involving ghosts, witches, werewolves, and anything else mystical or supernatural by confining itself to facts, logic, and proof. But that doesn't always mean that a few crazy cases don't sneak through. Did you know that the movie studio Warner Brothers was told to prove the existence of ghosts to win a lawsuit? After the horror movie The Conjuring was released and became a huge hit, author Gerald Brittle sued Warner Brothers. He said they had no right to make a movie about the Warrens, the real-life paranormal researchers and focus of the Conjuring films, because they had signed their rights over to him in 1978. Warner Brothers said they didn't need the rights because the Conjuring movies were based on what they called historical facts. Well, the court wasn't satisfied with that answer, and they basically told Warner Brothers that in order for that argument to hold up, they would need to prove the existence of ghosts. The case ended up settling out of court, so I guess Warner Brothers wasn't able to find that evidence? There is one case where the supernatural did provide evidence of a crime, and it led to the conviction and imprisonment of a murderer. In 1897, Elva Zona Shue died in her home in Greenbrier County. Her original cause of death was listed as accidental, but the medical examiner only looked at the bottom part of her body because her husband Edward sat on the bed with her, cradling her head and weeping. It was tragic, but most considered it an accident. That is, until Elva's mother began to suspect foul play. The reason for her suspicion was simple: the ghost of Elva would come to her at night. The ghost claimed that Edward had strangled her and broke her neck, mentioning specifically at the first joint. Elva's mother pressed for a stronger investigation, and eventually they exhumed the body to discover that her neck was in fact broken, at the exact place that Elva's mother said the ghost described. When the case went to trial, Edward's lawyers called her to the stand to recount her experience, assuming that jurors would find her story of the ghost of her daughter solving a mystery the absurd ravings of a grieving mother. Instead, they believed her and sent Edward to prison for life. It's rare that lawsuits involve communication from beyond the grave, but in the case of famous authors, it has actually happened twice. The first time was in 1917, when a new book called Jap Heron by Mark Twain was announced. The confusing part was that Twain had been dead for 7 years by the time the new book was announced. So how did he write it? Well, according to Emily Grant Hutchings, who actually put the words to page, Mark Twain had dictated the book to her through a Ouija board. It helped her case that she was from Twain's hometown and had corresponded with him while he was still alive. It hurt her case that she was an aspiring author who hadn't found her own success yet. When word of the book came out, there was quite a buzz, but not everyone was impressed. Twain's daughter Clara was afraid that this scam would tarnish her father's legacy, and Twain's publisher went a step further. They said that if it was actually a Twain book, then as Twain's publisher, they should receive any royalties from it. They sued to stop the release of the book, and it worked. The book was not released, and nearly every copy was destroyed, with only a few copies surviving. A similar case came about when author Chico Xavier claimed to have channeled the spirit of Humberto de Campo to write a new novel. He had claimed to channel many authors in writing a number of his 450 books, but the de Campo family were not happy. They sued him, demanding that he either admit that he was faking it or give the profits from the book to them, the rightful heirs. They even demanded that de Campo's spirit show up for the trial. But it never happened. The judge said, dead people have no civil rights, and a family can't claim works from someone if it was produced after their death. The history of witches and the legal system is not a pleasant one, but in at least one case, the court actually helped one witch. Lori Sforza was a practicing witch living in Salem in 2015, and she pleaded with the court to protect her from a man named Christian Day, who she claimed had been ceaselessly harassing her with targeted internet posts and disturbing phone calls. Sforza was a fortune teller, and one of the reasons she brought the case was because she said she saw her own future and that she was truly scared of the man she had once treated like her own son. Christian Day, the accused, had the funniest name possible for what turned out to be a practicing warlock who has appeared on the TV show Ghost Adventures and once described himself in his Twitter bio as warlock, drama queen, bitch. But the court came down on the side of Sforza, who described Day's creepy behavior, which included phoning her late at night and hissing insults at her, including the C word. The court ordered that Day have no contact with her under the threat of a potential 2.5 years in prison. So the city of Salem has come a long way, now using the law to protect a witch from a dangerous warlock. One of the most famous stories of the law versus the supernatural is the story of the devil and Daniel Webster, in which an attorney and Satan battle in a trial over a man's soul. But did you know that something kind of like that actually happened? In 1971, a Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania prison inmate named Gerald Mayo introduced the first lawsuit against the devil and his minions, or, as the lawsuit described them, Satan and his staff. Gerald alleged in his claim that, quote, Satan has on numerous occasions caused plaintiff misery and unwarranted threats against the will of plaintiff, that Satan has placed deliberate objects in his path and has caused plaintiff's downfall, end quote, which he claimed therefore deprived him of his constitutional rights. And listen, who among us has not felt like the devil wasn't causing us some strife? But extra credit to Gerald Mayo, who figured out how to turn that into a referendum on the Constitution. So what happened with the case? Did Gerald get his day in court? Did Lucifer appear in a puff of smoke and sulfur to get on the witness stand? No. Unfortunately for Gerald, the judge dismissed his case. And the dismissal was on procedural grounds. The judge noted a few problems with suing the devil, something that had literally never happened before then. When someone tries to sue the devil, it turns out that the court still has to follow due process. One of the things that makes it difficult is that the court was uncertain of whether Satan was actually within their jurisdiction to sue. For example, the devil is often referred to as the Prince of Darkness. Does that mean he is in fact a foreign prince, in which case he would be able to claim sovereign immunity? Another problem is that the case in question, where Gerald Mayo was suing the devil, was a class action lawsuit. That meant it had to pass a set of specific elements to be a viable class action case. One, there had to be so many people with the same problem that it would be impossible for all the individuals to separately sue the party. In the case of the devil, that was true. Lots of people have problems with him. Two, there had to be commonality of issues, meaning that everyone who would sue the devil had to have claims that shared a common legal basis. For the most part, that seems true of cases against the devil as well. And three, that the person making the class action suit claim should adequately represent the other parties. And that is where the case broke down. This lawsuit came from a man who was currently serving time in a maximum security prison for a series of high-level crimes. The court didn't feel that he adequately represented the typical claimant for a class action suit, and it was dismissed. Of course, if you're paranoid, you might think the judge made the decision for other reasons, like that he sold his soul. When it comes to a day in court, you never know what you're going to get. From ghost murder witnesses to movie studio paranormal investigations to witches v. warlocks. Heck, a convicted criminal might even try to blame his bad behavior on the residents of Hades. That's why we should all respect and appreciate the knowledgeable and sober-minded legal representatives who work for many years to gain expertise and then have to listen to this kind of bizarre nonsense in the courtroom every day. That's it for this episode of No Way That's Legal. If you want more stories of how the bizarre and unbelievable affect the law in ways you never imagined, be sure to like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.